Well, guys, we have to talk about this because it's just dominating every discussion in my group, on YouTube, basically everywhere you go. You're hearing it's time to sell Google. I mean, their time may finally be up after years of domination. So let's take a look at all the points around this and see if we indeed do need to sell Google, because it is in fact the end and we need to take action. I just ask in exchange for you to gently tap that like button and consider subscribing too. It's super easy to do if you like the truth without the hype. All right, guys, so I can't lie, this has dominated discussion, especially in my group. It's just come up. There's lots of, people on one side, people on the other side, basically people everywhere. But I kind of wanted to start off this discussion with a quote from one of our, senior group members here who just absolutely knocks out of the park every time he posts something. So I just kind of wanted to read that to you guys here to kind of cage this discussion as we move forward. We're at the beginning of a big step change in how things work. AI is going to change a lot. There are going to be the business models we think are solid now that will fail, and new ones we haven't considered that will boom. Some companies we think are at the top of their game now may actually become much bigger, and unfortunately at the start of something like this, it's nearly impossible to see past the inflection point. It's good to think about it and keep your eye open for opportunities. Just remember that you know next to nothing about the future and consider that in your risk calculations. Don't trust your assumptions. Question all of them, especially if you are sure of something. If you ever find yourself using an absolute, like this will, this won't, this can't, only this, etc., be prepared to be surprised. And all of that is very true. When I started digging into the discussion and started digging into the various points, I saw a lot of those type statements going on the videos and the discussions and the articles and everywhere else. And that obviously can put you in a dangerous spot. And there's actually a bigger point I want to make right up front here, and that is there's going to be multiple winners in this. This is not a winner-take-all type scenario, and I know that's kind of what we've been conditioned here on YouTube to hear, because of course it was going to be all EV makers or all car makers are going to die, and Tesla's going to be the last one standing, and everybody's going to know a Tesla by 2030, and a lot of other narratives like that, to where people were just kind of like, hey, there's not going to be multiple winners, it's just going to be Tesla. I don't see how anybody else can compete, and all these other things like that, and it's just not true, guys. There's going to be multiple winners in EV, and there's going to be multiple winners in the AI universe. It's not a winner-take-all scenario. Same thing with the metaverse, same thing with virtually anything else that you can put out there. It's not going to be a winner-take-all type scenario. And an even bigger point in this discussion than that is nobody has won the AI race at all. I mean, it's basically the assumptions are out there that basically Google doesn't have any AI and ChatGPT is the end-all be-all AI, and neither one of those are true at all. But that kind of seems to be the narrative. The reality is, I think we're basically in the first minute of a 60-minute ball game here in regards to AI, and that's a long way to go. It's like kind of trying to judge the Super Bowl based upon the first minute of what happened in that first minute of the first half. I mean, it's just ridiculous to do, and it's not something you would ever do in terms of judging the entire game, but that's exactly what's going on here. Heck, I don't even know if we're in the first minute yet. We may actually be in the pregame before we ever get there, and basically, all the talking heads and all those sort of things are kind of doing their thing, when the reality is nobody knows how the game's going to play out. And that's kind of right here where we are with this AI talk. But I hear you. I know. There's some excellent points being made out there by YouTubers and the media and everybody else. So let's kind of talk about a few of those and kind of see, is there actual facts there? Or is it more speculation? Or is it something else altogether? Or maybe it is absolutely true and we need to sell this stock. Now, I'm not going to discuss all the other pieces of Google and Google's business model and what all else they do. I'm just going to talk about Google search here, since that's kind of the big kind of piece that everybody continues to talk about and everybody's kind of bang on here and such. And to me, when you look at Google search, they essentially have two huge things that make up their moat. The first is nobody is close to them in regards to actually being the best in terms of search. I mean, honestly, guys, it's not like, Google isn't the go-to place for searching for everything. You Google it, right? I mean, I don't know anybody that's binging anything. I mean, do you know anybody that's binging anything? I don't know anybody that's binging anything. I mean, if you managely, because all this news came out, if you switch to Bing, I'd love to hear down in the comments. But I think the vast majority of us are still Googling the vast majority of items that we need. I'm not saying it's everyone, obviously, but I'm not seeing this crazy shift to Bing, and there never really has been either. And oh, by the way, this is not the first time Microsoft has tried to challenge Google in this space. I can think of 3 right off the top of my head where they challenged and failed epically, and it was the next best thing to rival Google and this and that, and it just ended up falling to the wayside. And of course, you never really remember those failures, right? Because they were so epic in nature. But for whatever reason, this one right here has caught steam that this time it's different, and maybe it is. Maybe it's not, but for right now, Google is still the king of search, and that is the first part of their moat. And the second is that nobody delivers more bang for the buck for the advertisers than Google does. Now you could argue maybe Meta, with Facebook is right up there. They're kind of comparable and such, but it's kind of like those two at the top and everybody else is just a distant, I guess that would be third, a distant third. They're not even in the ballpark there. So that's their second piece of their moat is, hey, not only do you got to beat them in terms of being the best, now you got to deliver more bang for the buck for those advertisers. Advertisers are not jumping ship from pouring all their money into Google, which of course is what drives the revenue for search, all of a sudden into Bing. If Bing is not delivering the same bang for buck, even if it's gaining some eyes, it's still not delivering that same bang for buck that Google is. That's something that they're going to have to solve and something that they haven't been able to solve prior in terms of, okay, hey, yeah, they're getting less people, but out of those people that they do have, they're still not delivering the ratios that Google is in regards to bang for the buck to advertisers. So that's a whole nother piece of the discussion. So, right, they got to basically appease the consumer. And then you also have to be able to appease the advertisers there to actually hurt Google's business. And that's why that moat is so big and why it's been so hard for anybody to overtake them all these years later is because you got to do both. And it's really, really hard to do. So basically 4 years, Microsoft has not been able to deliver the ROI to advertisers that Google has. But now, magically, all of a sudden, they're going to deliver way more value to advertisers than Google is before, and they're just going to destroy Google. That's kind of the narrative that's out there, despite the fact there's not even a proof of concept, much less actual proof of that they can actually do that, and then actually advertisers wanting to jump over and actually make that switch. There's no data, no nothing really. It's just, hey, it's AI, therefore it's just going to happen, right? That's just how it works, right? It's AI, therefore it's going to happen, right? That's kind of the arguments that I hear, and that's kind of why whenever I hear that, I'm just kind of going, that just doesn't seem like something that's really going to overcome this, Google moat that they have and such. Now, I'm not saying it couldn't. I'm not saying that, won't happen in the future. I'm just saying as of right now, with all the facts that we have right in front of us, that's not the case. Oh yeah, and all of these arguments are basically all assuming that, Google can't pivot, or Google won't have AI, or Google won't be able to match them or do something good enough to where people don't jump ship, or to where advertisers don't feel like they need to move their money from Google over to Bing, or any of these other things like that. That's kind of baked into the assumption as well, and I think that's a silly assumption to make for one of the best companies in the world, that they're just going to stay stagnant and do nothing and just basically die off like, some old man stock, as if Google hasn't innovated over the years. They have. As if Google hasn't been involved in AI, because they are. And as if they just can't make management decisions or anything else because they have a bad management team, which isn't true at all either. So when I kind of think through a lot of these narratives and such that are putting out there, they seem very, very good on the surface. But as you kind of scratch down that surface and actually get into the meat of the issue and actual facts, it kind of starts to really fall apart. So I'm basically waiting for somebody to prove to me that there is something actually disruptive that is actively taking market share from Google, and something that is actively monetizing it to a point to where it's a better bang for the buck for advertisers and making money for the company. So on this point right here, to me, this is all pure speculation. It's just like, if you guys remember, back, whenever the EV arms race was going on, there was a lot of folks on the side of Lucid's going to catch Tesla and it's going to be neck and neck, and who's going to win, Tesla or Lucid, for all the American EV market and all that sort of such. And you can laugh about it now because it is kind of funny, but back then it was all over YouTube. Big YouTubers were pumping that sort of stuff. It was all over the media. Who's going to win? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And, obviously that was just pure speculation. Heck, they can't even get out of the starting block yet. And there's Tesla running free on the other side there, producing like crazy and growing like crazy. The race isn't even close, but back then you had legitimate folks pulling money from Tesla over to Lucid because, speculation. And that's what speculation gets you in the end in regards to the stock market. So in regards to that first point right there, I don't see a reason to sell right there, but there are other points. So let's discuss those and see if there is another case to be made. This is where we have to discuss the actual money, the actual monetization of AI, which is something I really haven't heard too many folks talk about at all, if I've heard anybody talk about it at all, especially on a lot of these, news outlets and a lot of these videos and such, where they're discussing how, basically Google's going to lose. They're not discussing the monetization of AI, which, by the way, does anybody know how we're going to monetize AI? I don't know. I got a lot of theories. I got a lot of ideas. But is anybody actually doing it in practice and actually proving that it can be profitable? I'm happy to hear. Please comment down below if you know it, but I wasn't able to find anything where, beyond what our AI that's already out there that is being monetized, this new AI that's going to crush Google, what's it monetized to? What is, what revenue is it drawing in? How much does it cost? All these other things. Matter of fact, I've seen a little bit of cost data out there, and it's super expensive. It's crazy expensive actually to do for a company. So now you've got to monetize something and bring over more money than you need to just in traditional search and such, speaking in regards to Google directly. So that to me, the business case may or may not be there for this, AI thing to actually be monetized in the first place. Somebody's going to figure it out. I agree. They're also going to figure out how to get the cost down. I agree completely. All those things are true. But how many years is that going to take? Is it going to happen in 3 months, 6 months, 6 years, 3 years, 1 year? I don't know. Nobody knows. And that's kind of the point with this whole thing once again, is it's pure speculation. Nobody knows the how, nobody knows the when, and nobody knows how much. Those are kind of important when you're talking about dethroning a mega cap company that sat on top for so long. Now, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying we can't get there. I'm not saying it won't happen one day. But to act like, oh my gosh, I need to sell out of Google right now because of that point, kind of seems silly whenever there's, nothing there right now. Like I said, doesn't mean it can't happen, but it's not like, Google's imminent demise is coming in the next 6 months. Maybe it is, I don't know. But for right now, that's not normally how these type things work out and such. So again, until I can see somebody who shows me how they're going to monetize this new, increased version of AI, and then more importantly, what are the costs and how they're going to get those costs down, and then all the other things we talked about in the first point, you kind of see how the picture there is kind of lining up to where, I don't know if I should be selling Google or not. But I agree, there are other good points to consider here. So let's jump into those next points. Now, this next one here is a big one for some people, and that's basically that the government is going after Google, guys. They're suing Google, and they're just basically in that spotlight. But here's the reality of that. All big tech companies, it seems like, are always in the spotlight. I mean, Meta couldn't get out of the spotlight for like 3 or 4 years. Apple gets in the spotlight. Google's been in the spotlight in the past. Microsoft's been in the spotlight. All those big tech companies come under government scrutiny, whether it be from the Department of Justice, whether it be from Congress, all kinds of SEC in some cases, all kinds of places like that. And guess what happens in the end? No matter how much political wrangling, how much, showboating and all the other stuff that's out there, oh, we're going to get big tech, we're going to break them up and all this sort of stuff. The reality is nothing happens beyond a fine occasionally, as if these companies cannot absorb these crazy fines, because guess what? They can. Hurts for a quarter and they move on. That's the reality of this situation. There's a whole lot of saber rattling and a whole lot of, look at me, I drug them before Congress and I did this, that, and the other, whatever. It's political gamesmanship in the end because of the way the laws are written. And more importantly, these guys have the best lawyers in the world working for them and are probably able to run circles around the Department of Justice lawyers and all the other lawyers involved in this case. So whether we like it or not, whether we think it's fair or not, this is nothing new, and this is not something. If you're concerned with this, then don't own any big tech. And by the way, that's eventually going to include Tesla and a lot of other companies like that, because this is just the reality of what happens when you turn to a mega cap stock and you're just so well run and you're such a good company and you're just able to innovate and innovate and innovate. You're going to get drug in front of Congress, guys. You're going to make enemies across the board, or they just have to look like they're doing something because people are upset about it, whatever the case is. I don't really care in the end why. I just know it's the reality of owning these type stocks. And I also know that, hey, this was, maybe a scary thing a long time ago, but it's been going on for so long now. Nothing's happened for so long. And these CEOs, it's basically in their job description. Hey, be prepared to, testify before Congress a couple times a year. It's basically in the job description now. And, basically, hey, they probably already have money set aside for the fines that they may inevitably get from not just the US government. It happens with foreign governments all the time, guys. You can look across big tech and there's constantly this government suing them, this company, this country fining them, all sorts of things like that. So for me, this is, again, one of those deals. I'll absolutely be paying attention to it, but it's not something that's going to make me just sell a stock, because I would have been forced to sell out of every stock that I own. Apple, Amazon, Google, I mean, you name it. I would have been forced to sell at some point in time because they got drug in front of Congress, or they were, being looked at by the Department of Justice, or whatever the case is. Now, in the short term, that probably means, yeah, there's going to be some pain for the stock. As a long-term buy and hold investor, that's exactly what I want. Now, I prefer it to be on an earnings call, where they have a great earnings and Wall Street just is stupid. But, hey, that didn't happen for now. Now we have all this hype that to me is unfounded. And you have, the government doing whatever the heck the government's going to do. And so therefore, it's going to create a bit of a drag on the stock. So I have been happily buying the stock. Now, let me say this for everybody out there who's considering selling or still is not comfortable with everything I just said. That is perfectly okay. And that is why I love investing right there. The right decision for me may not be the right decision for you, and we may both win. I mean, I may decide to hold on to Google and have a great return over the next 3 to 5 years, and you may decide to sell your Google, put it into a different stock, and have the same return or maybe even a better return than me. We both can win at this game. It's not a, hey, if I own Google and you don't, you're going to lose, or, vice versa. That's not how investing works. Unfortunately, that's the way it's pitched a lot of times, the way it's, kind of presented to you guys, but it's not the reality of investing. So keep that in mind as you're kind of looking at what you're deciding to do and such. Don't just take my word for it. Do your own due diligence And understand that if you come to a different conclusion than me, that's perfect, because that means it's the right decision for you. And that's exactly what you need to do. And more importantly, we can both win in this game, so it doesn't matter in the end. Do what's best for you, do your due diligence, put in the work, and then basically make your decision from there. So hopefully this was helpful. And remember, if you want to get 5 courses for free and talk to me on live streams and have access to my DMs and access to our great Discord group where you kind of saw the quote we got earlier, and get all my buy and sell alerts and all my watch list with price targets and everything else like that, make sure you check out the link down in the description and see if a membership is right for you. And click this video here if you want to see the top 3 stocks I'm buying right now, and click here if you want to see my exact plan for this market this year. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.